Chapter 10, Kangaroo Island, Video 2 of 2. We arrived at the water's edge and found the 2 canoes. We were dressed for deep ocean and storm. I think one life vest even had a light and a whistle. As we waded into what we thought would be treacherous waters, we found a knee-deep puddle. Low tide. We felt slightly overdressed. I was sure Kate could see tiny neon dots on the horizon and chuckle to herself. We paddled out of the bay and around the rocky head into the ocean. The tide was so low that we could see all the sea life floating around under us. Schools of fish were darting around everywhere. The most mesmerizing thing was watching little stingrays the size of a sheet of paper emerging out of the water, flapping their wing-like body to fly a few feet, then dive into the sea again. As if they were daring each other to see who could live without water in their gills the longest. They looked a little bit like UFOs, their pointy tails sticking up like antennas. It was impressive how far they could actually fly over the water's surface. While we watched this spectacle, the tide got even lower and our canoes ran aground. We had no choice but to get out and walk. We walked to the closest bit of land that was accessible from the water. Trouble was that the small beach was lined by rather tall cliffs. Today I have no idea why we did not wade back the way we had paddled from. Instead, we did this. Kaori and Holger climbed up the cliff face first. Hannah and I pushed the canoes up, while the guys pulled from above. Why? Why on earth? It was an ordeal to get them up there. They weren't the modern lightweight canoes, those weighed a ton. I tried to imagine how we looked from further away. 4 crazy people dressed in 80s neon pushing canoes up a cliff. Even the thought of it is bizarre to me now. What were we thinking? Once we managed to have both canoes and us safely up there, we realized how stupid this had been, because now we had to carry said canoes all the way back to the bay, when we could have just pulled them there, which would have been a whole lot easier. There was no way to get them back down the cliff without breaking the canoes and us. So that evening you could see 4 people walking through what looked like the prairie in swim vests carrying 2 canoes. Surreal. A Dali picture brought to life. As we walked and our arms got tired, we realized how tremendously stupid we looked. Humor was the only thing that helped us find the strength to carry on. As we laughed and joked, we suddenly had to stop in our tracks. In front of us stood a huge specimen of a red kangaroo, much taller than us, muscular and ready to fight if need be. We just stared at each other, the kangaroo and us. A few magical moments later it hopped away so fast you could have believed it was never there. This was one of those moments in life that was so unexpected and so perfect it leaves you speechless. We also met the 4th most poisonous snake in the world, a tiger snake. That, on the other hand, did not leave us speechless but screaming. I had enough with my spider bites and did not want to add any more encounters of the venomous kind. Hannah had read somewhere that one needs to stomp on the ground really hard so the snake would get scared and leave. In my opinion, it didn't sound like a good idea to scare a poisonous snake. But before I could sound my concern, everybody else was stomping on the ground. They looked like they were performing some archaic dance ritual. To my astonishment, it worked. The tiger snake slithered off. Days later, on a cooler morning of only 80 degrees Fahrenheit, after Hannah and I had spread fresh straw amongst the garden plants to keep the heat away, Kate asked us to groom her car with a bit of straw. Hannah and I exchanged bemused looks, but did as we were told and cleaned the car like you would a horse. I wondered if Kate talked to the car when she was grooming it. In hindsight, it was probably the only sensible way to clean a car without using a drop of water that was needed elsewhere. That day, after lunch, we were driving to town. We would see other human beings. That was highly exciting. And Hannah and I felt we needed to get dressed up in our least dirty clothes for this occasion. We went to Kingscote, the largest town on Kangaroo Island. It had about 1,000 residents at the time. That wasn't the bustling metropolis we'd hoped for, but we enjoyed the luxuries of civilization in the form of iced chocolate and a flushing toilet. We both burst into manic giggles when we flushed the public toilet and felt ecstatic about this feat of engineering. We watched the pelicans at the harbor for a while, then went to the supermarket for Kate because she could not go in. On the way back home, we stopped at another farm. The farmers were called Jill and Ray. Their son Craig was in the middle of building a house, all on his own. They were friends with Kate and saw her now and again. The farmers here were a tight community. Even though the farms were so far apart that you would never see each other if you didn't want to, they would come together to socialize and help each other if needed. It was only a few days until Christmas, and the gods gave this piece of earth a present. It rained. That was so unbelievably beautiful. I had never enjoyed rain as much as I did on that day. The land breathed a sigh of relief. The trees stood more upright. The grass stretched higher. The birds twittered happily. The kangaroos bathed their faces in the wind and rain. Every form of life on this island was in utter joy and happiness. The eucalypt trees filled the air with their intense scent, and we felt revitalized and full of energy. Kate hoped her water tank would be filled to the brim, and we hoped with her as we sat on the porch watching the rain, giddy with cheer. Kate's eyes glimmered and shone like those of a child on Christmas morning. The rain only lasted 2 days, then moved on to bring joy to another land. The ground was nice and soft, so we could remove some more big roots with ease. The temperatures were under 90 degrees Fahrenheit, and there was even a breeze that did not feel like it came out of an oven. The radio played Christmas songs, and the aloe plants were decorated with baubles. To me, it did not feel like Christmas at all, but Kate was in high spirits. This would be my first Christmas without my family. The thought of that filled me with both sadness and excitement. I knew I would miss the epic meal at Granny's. There would be soup to start, cooled down for Granddad because he loathed soup that was too hot to eat. We'd count out bone marrow dumplings in the soup to make sure no one had more than the other. Jealous, we'd guard our dumplings and scoff down the lot. Ah, the deliciousness. After that, an eating marathon would begin. Granny was known to cook about 5 different main dishes with 10 plus sides and salads. We were only 15 people, but the food was enough to feed 45 every year. And every year Granny would say, "Who is to eat all this?" It was an opulent feast, followed by ice cream and homemade eggnog, followed by coffee and cake, followed by bread and farmer's sausage. It was a never-ending train of food, and everyone would leave in the evening feeling slightly sick. I would miss that indeed. In 2 days' time, we would leave Kate. I felt guilty about it because she would be alone at Christmas. We had planned to rent a car with Kauri and Holger to see the other parts of the island that weren't accessible to us on foot. Then we'd go back to Adelaide on Christmas Eve. I now thought that this plan was wrong. I had grown to admire and love Kate and felt like we were betraying her hospitality by leaving her during that special time of the year. She could not go out into the world but invited the world to come to her, and now we'd leave her for Christmas. But perhaps she was glad to be rid of us too. I always find guests are like fish. Fabulous on the first day, okay on the second, not so good on the third, and come the fourth, you have to throw them out. And indeed, Kate did not seem to mind. By now she was used to the solitary existence and thrived in it. She took us on a long walk along beautiful beaches and bays, all of which were untouched, tranquil, idyllic. There are no rules, no regulations. This is where complete freedom can be found. The only thing you feel are the tiredness of your legs, the sweet ache of muscles, and the life in your body. So much life. The sunset made the water glitter in rainbow colors. One can breathe at a place like that. Long, deep breath of the freshest air. One can cry at a place like that too, and the wind dries the tears on your cheeks like a gentle lover would, and takes your heavy thoughts out to the sea, where the seagulls listen to the concert of the waves crashing to the shore. The sea was full of starfish in the most amazing colors. You would not believe that these bright colors could be found in nature, but under the sea they are. There were hundreds of starfish so close to the beach and the surface, as if they were watching the sunset too. They were just floating in the sea, enjoying their time as if all miseries in this world did not exist. And they might not exist for them. Starfish just live and to die one day, nothing more. Yet we humans believe we can actually change the way of the world, and we worry all along the way, mainly about ourselves. Aren't we the dumbest creatures on earth? Our last day came and we went out on the canoes again. It was just before a storm. The tide was in and the water was deep. The bay was unrecognizable. The sky was wild and gray. The water seemed black and threatening. Even the pelicans were silent. All we could hear was the splashing of the oars. It was eerie. Today, the life vests weren't a silly accessory at all. It was a strange world we were floating in that day. A great day for reminiscing. I would miss that bay, the farm, the fairy gardens, Kate. The wind blew wild, and if I closed my eyes and just listened, it could have been a snowstorm. The Christmas songs made sense then. We left on the shuttle bus to Penashore and got our rental car. Hannah, a declared coffee junkie, had to feed her habit after going cold turkey at the farm. Then we started driving west. Our first stop was Murray Lagoon, low tide. Some kangaroos enjoyed the beach. Next stop, Bull's Beach, a little cove where we made the friendly acquaintance of a sea lion. It was swimming next to where we walked, doing all sorts of tricks as if to show off. At Seal Bay we saw hundreds of sea lions sunbathing, playing and socializing, but the encounter at Bull's Beach was more personal and special to us all. One sight followed the other. For such a small island, there was a lot to see. The natural beauty of this place was overwhelming. We found a place called Little Sahara, and true to its name, it was full of sand dunes, as far as the eye could see. This landscape did not seem to fit in with the rest of the island. It was a bizarre sight. The dunes were wide and the sand was rippled like waves. The wind constantly blew the top of the peaks and carried clouds of sand from one dune to the next. One could spend hours just watching the sand travel. We had a lot of fun running up those dunes, rolling down or sliding as if on a surfboard. We spent a whole afternoon laughing and frolicking amongst them. This was the highlight of my day. Such unexpected fun and laughter is rare and worth more than anyone could pay to find it. It must have been the first wild goanna, an Australian lizard, I saw when we drove on. At least the first big one. Or maybe just the first one I remember. It sat in the middle of the road. The road must have been like a free buffet for the goanna. None of us had ever seen so much roadkill, and Kate's warning, "Don't drive at dusk and at night," held a brand new meaning. We reached Point Ellen and became spectators and admirers of the mighty tenacity of the sea, displayed dramatically at this place. It was an elongated little stretch of land that protruded into the sea, a rocky land finger. Gigantic waves reared up heavenwards, only to crash down with loud plaster on the spiky rocks that were succumbing to the water masses. The sound was deafening. The sight was both frightening and alluring, and humbling too. This was pure, uncensored, uncontrolled strength. If you stood on one of those rocks, this mighty power of nature would not falter. It would not make a difference whether you were a good person or a bad one. One wave would destroy you with the help of the submissive rocks. And they would not care. The sea would drag your lifeless body out, and the world would carry on. How is it that we humans think we are so important? In the early evening, we arrived at the entrance to Flinders Chase National Park, where the kangaroos were so used to seeing humans that they came right up to the car and looked curiously into our rolled-down windows. We decided to enter and make it to the remarkable rocks for sundown. From far away they did not look remarkable at all, but the closer we got, the more spectacular they became. To get there, we had to drive down a long-stretched hill on what we called the roller coaster road. It was the craziest road I had ever seen. Whoever built it must have been drunk. It was windy and curvy for no apparent reason. Maybe Australian road planners just know how to have fun. We shifted the car out of gear and just let it roll down. It truly was like riding a roller coaster. The remarkable rocks were very surreal looking, as were so many scenes in Australia. They looked like a movie set made of paper mache. They are big boulders standing on a round rock platform. Some of those massive boulders are hollow, and you can sit on the inside of the rock. There's rusty-colored moss growing on top of the gray, almost cardboard-looking surface. If I hadn't been there and hadn't touched the rocks with my own hands, I would not believe they are real. Millions of years of rain and water eroded the rocks to today's shape. The sky began to darken and the sun went down. Against Catherine's advice, we drove at the time of day that was filled with wildlife. We made it all the way back to the park entrance and decided to sleep on the picnic tables there. The boys were asleep in no time, but their snoring could not overshadow the noises of the night. It was louder than during the day. All the animals seemed to come alive at night. We heard this incredibly loud sound, like a cross between a donkey braying, a frog croaking, and a human belching. Hannah and I decided not to be brave that night and fled to the car, leaving the boys to the mercy of whatever was out there. We found out what had made the strange sound when it got light. It was our first wild koala encounter, and we hadn't even realized it. In the trees above us were some of those cuddly-looking animals. I had no idea they could produce such an astonishing loud bass sound, much deeper than what you'd expect of an animal that weighs no more than 20 pounds. Our last day on Kangaroo Island was filled with more sightseeing. Charming little beaches, coves, caves, tiny towns with alternative artists, more kangaroo encounters, finding a gas station, and driving the roller coaster road one last time. It was an easy day with joyous hearts and no sorrows anywhere in sight.